in Ludwigsburg, which is down in Bavaria, in Ludwigsburg, and the number of that camp was 5A, and it was supposed to be a hospital, and there was a doctor there, and they had some blankets thrown over a rope, and that was the difference. The other side was something else, and this was the hospital, and so they treated, you know, what I was doing. They didn't do anything, just kept it clean, and then I'm not so sure if that's where he took off from or not, but I think maybe it might have been.
Kind of think so.
But anyway, we both ended up in HAMMELBURG in the middle of January, and it went on until the 27th of March. Now, what happened there is that, or they claimed it, is that Patton had a son-in-law, Colonel Winters?
John Waters.
Waters.
John Waters.
Winters, I go, Waters.
Yeah, Waters.
And his son-in-law was a prisoner in that camp. And that camp was occupied by thousands and thousands of prisoners. I mean, American prisoners, Russian prisoners, officers, non-coms, French, British, Canadian, everybody was in the war that they had in that camp. Probably, I guess 100, well over 100,000 men was there.
Wow.
And including his son-in-law. And on the morning of the 27th of March, I'm looking out the window, we were in a stable. And there was an opening, a stable ran on both sides like it's an opening in the middle. And I was in that middle and looking out there when I saw this big German tank come flying. It was over a quarter of a mile away or more. He came flying through that front gate, and here comes look like a whole American army. I mean, all these tanks, and they're shooting up everything. And the funny thing about it that I never could put together is that they'd shoot up a building that was full of Germans, and right next door to it would be a building that wouldn't be full of, be full of prisoners or something. And I never saw them make one mistake. I mean, they were knocking things down like you wouldn't believe. And they actually captured this camp, and we were free.
Yeah.
I mean, they run off the guard company, they knocked down the wire. I mean, we were free. And here you're looking around, you see thousands of guys all standing around saying, what must we do? My own situation was that I jumped up on one of the tanks came by, and I jumped up on the top of the tank. The guy opens it up, and he's a buck sergeant, and there was a tank commander, and he's covered with blood. He's got blood all over him. He's got one dead and one wounded in the tank. And he wanted to know if I wanted a K ration. And he handed me his K ration, and I says, how about a ride? And he says, can you work that gun? There's a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the outside of the tank. And I said, well, yeah, I can work the gun. And he started to hand up ammo buckets. And I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? I thought we were liberated, And he said, I'll never forget it as long as I live. He looked at me, he said, we had to fight to get in here. We're going to fight to get out. And I said, well, nothing was clicking. And I knew the tank sometimes went in behind the lines a little bit, I said, well, how far is the lines? He said, 50 miles.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, man, I wasn't going to ride the back of a tank for 50 miles, just to the lines. And I jumped down off that fella pretty quick. And now, by this time now, we're just standing around. We're free. We don't. Now, you got two choices. You can sit here and stand around until somebody told you what to do or to do something or whatever, or you could wander off. Now, the smart thing to do would be to stand around there and, until somebody got to, knew what was happening, it gets you straightened out. The dumb thing to do would be to wander off. And I did wander off. I we knew right across the road over there was an old theater over there, and I knew they had Red Cross food in that theater. They wouldn't give it to us, but they had it in there. And I'll fling open the doors of that theater. It's the vestibule. There's double doors here, about this much vestibule, and then double doors into the main auditorium of the theater. And I rush up that baby, you know, oh my God. And they're standing as the biggest crowd you ever saw in your life. Actually, he probably wasn't any bigger than you, but to me, he looked 9 feet tall. Damn, I told you. And Smitty said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Man, there's a crowd in there." And he said, "Well, there's no sense in running." I said, "No, there's no sense in running, but I don't know what." So anyway, he was a promoter. Smitty was. He said, "I'll get him all preoccupied," and he said, "You take care of him." I said, "Okay." So we opened up the doors, kind of nice, and we saunter in there, and Smitty started talking to him in pidgin German, and trying to say, he says, "I got tobacco," but he didn't have any cigarette papers, and so he wanted to try to talk him into some cigarette papers, and that's when I got him with a half a brick. I don't know what he's doing to this day, but I'll guarantee you he's got a sore spot right there. And we loaded up with, you never saw such, we took our overcoats and made packs out of them, and we couldn't hardly carry them. We had so much food. And we struck out. I don't know where we were going to go, or then we struck off that thing. We're going about 2 hours, got captured again. And this time when they put us in with a bunch of the first time I'd ever seen them was the political prisoners, the Serbs and Jews, and the ones where they hung the atrocities on them. And they had about 200 of them in this column. And these troops took us and put us in there with them. And here we are. These guys are emaciated. None of them, it seemed like every one of them had something, a hand or a finger or ear, a leg, something was gone. And just skin and bones. And here these two guys show up like, God, we got food, and it dawned on us that, we're either going to have to give them that food or they're going to kill us. And anyway, make a long story short on that, we took off running again, and when it got a little dusk, and there was a little incident there when I took off running. Smitty had to follow me and went back to these two houses, and there's a gate back there. I didn't see the gate. And I hit that thing, down I go. Smitty falls on top of me, and I hear the burp gun go off. And I hear those slugs hit something. And I said, "Smitty's dead." I mean, they just killed him. It was boy, it was a half a dozen of them. And I'm laying there, and I don't know, what, and finally he starts moving. And I find out he never got a scratch, never got him at all, but his food that he had on his back, it would ruined a bunch of some of that food. But then we walked off, and we were free for 3 or 4 days, I guess, and lost trying to travel at night and in the daytime. It's overcast all the time, and we just weren't doing anything. And we were going to get killed because we'd be in the middle of a field and just hiding in the middle of out there in the corn rows. I mean, without any just the plowed ground. And they'd have troop movements going through there. You reach out and pat them on the boots. And we're laying there, and something's not going to happen. And that's where it starts getting really funny, because one place we stopped into, and it was getting daylight, and we said we're going to hide during the daytime. We did, but in here they had 2 great big barrels that were set back into the ground, some kind of a spring house or something. And I was going to bust one of them open, just let it run on the ground, you know, just for being mean to some, you know. Anyway, Smitty got it to dripping, and we got into it. And you never saw two worse drunks in your life. I had lost at this time, I'd lost about 60 pounds. And Smitty was skin and bones. And we got into that stuff and it knocked us right out. Sure. I mean, we could not move for 24 hours. I mean, just nothing would move. We couldn't do it. I mean, we could blink our eyes, you know, and talk. But when we got up, and finally after 24 hours, we, no more traveling at night, boy. I mean, right down the road, baby. Singing and everything. As a matter of fact, we hit this town. I wish I knew the name of that town, because I'd go back there and see it if I could. We hit this town, and you know, giving it to, and the flags were out there and everything, and all of a sudden the people coming running out, and the burgermeister of the town come out, and we get them all these food. The Germans would kill for that soluble coffee that you know, that we had in there, and they made hot water, and then we give them soap and give them some, you know, cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. And we had the biggest party you ever saw, and and so they gave us directions of where the next town was and where the lines were, and occasionally you could hear some small arms fire, and so we didn't know what we wanted to do was to get as close as we could to the lines, and then just dig in and hide someplace and hope that our lines would pass over, because we didn't want to go through their lines and we didn't want to go through our lines either. And so Smitty said, well, maybe we ought to just wait right here. And we get closer to this. And that's me talking again. We get closer to this, and we went down to that next town and went hit that town. I've been working on a railroad or something down, you know, we're singing and halfway popped up still. And the next thing I know, I look at, boy, no flags, there's no people, all the houses are all boarded up, nobody moved and everything. Oh, something's not right here. And I turned around and started running the other way, and I heard the burp gun go off, and I went in a ditch, and I turned around, and there, all the dust settled down, and there was Smitty all and stuff like this. Right there, he couldn't really see him. Dust that flew up. And next thing I know, that's when the guy told me to get out of that ditch. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, and what we had run into was the guard company of a bunch of officers, American officers that they had bringing down that were in prison up in Poland someplace. And the Russians, of course, are coming in now. See, we're a month away from the war being over. And the Russians are coming in, so I don't know why they just didn't want to let them get liberated, but then they took them and started walking them. And they walked them, those guys had marched about 600 or 700 miles. And they were guarded by, there was about 300 of them. You wouldn't believe it, there was about 300 of them. And the guard company, they had a guard company of over 100 guys. And that's a guard for over 3 guys. If you're thinking back, of course, it's going shifts, of course. And they had a major that was the field commander, and a full colonel that was the commander of everything. And he was a no count so-and-so. And you never would see him. He had one of these big Mercedes things with the tandem axles on the back, you know, big touring thing, and some woman traveling with him. And if he got a hold of a gallon of gas or whatever, you know, where you never would ever see him. But if he didn't have any fuel, then we had a truck that had a charcoal burner on the side of it. I don't know how they did that, but the truck burned charcoal, and that's the way it moved along. That had food and supplies and stuff on it, and this truck would go out ahead of the column every morning and get about 12 miles away, 12, 15 miles, and they'd set up and cook a meal. And then the column would take off, and you spend most of the day I mean, up until around noon or 1 o'clock getting there. And they'd give you get one meal a day on the road there, and then they'd put you up in barns, and next day it'd be the same thing. And so when that's what they put us in with, and we were the only two enlisted men anywhere around. And so we were treated from the very beginning really skeptical. They didn't know who we were, and went through some of the normal stuff about they finally convinced them after about 2 or 3 hours that we weren't plants, that we really were who we said we were. And so when they found that out, then they had us go see the commander, the American commander of that group, and he was a full colonel from the 82nd Airborne. And I mean, like a face like a bulldog. I mean, you couldn't get him out of central casting any better. And he said, "Now I'll tell you two hot shots something right now." He says, "If you take off again," he says, "if you take off again," he says, "I will personally shoot you." Or something along those lines. And we were under, because everybody at that time was under direct orders to stay in big groups if you possibly could. And so that started the rest of the war, the next about 30 days. That's what we did every day. Get up in the morning at daylight and walk 12 or 15 miles. And you'd get a can of soup that they made, would be some kind of potato soup or whatever they could commandeer, and sometimes a couple of spoons of beet sugar, and sometimes a piece of bread about the size of your fist, and then whatever you could, swap for, or trade for, or steal, or whatever you wanted to call it, and we hit there, of course, with all this food, and it didn't seem to impress them all that much, except there was one. It was a captain, and when he came up, we had written on our field jackets, we had where were you from on the back. You'd do anything to keep from somebody stealing your jacket. And he said, "Who's this from Louisville, Kentucky?" And I says, "Yeah, it's me." And he said, "Well, my name is Father James Kavanaugh, and he was a Jesuit from a chaplain, and he was a Jesuit, and he was stationed up in Milford, Ohio, and he was about ready to pass out. He says, I saw you were from Louisville, Kentucky." He says, I know a couple of, he knew the Archbishop here and one thing or another, and he came up. And I looked at him, and boy, he was in bad shape, really bad shape. And so he was from Ohio, and Smitty was from Ohio, and we started giving him some food, and then he writes a book too. I gotta find that book for you. Troy, he writes a book, and we were in that book too, pretty prominent. Smitty and I both. Wasn't quite. It was a couple of mistakes in there that weren't right, but basically it was. And he had written in the flyleaf of the thing to Jim Miller, "The Cree who saved my life from HAMMELBURG to Mars at Gars." And he was starving. He was giving what he got. He was giving away to people, and one thing or another like that. And he was really getting pretty hurt with malnutrition. And so we got to be pretty good friends with him. And everywhere. Have you ever been in Germany? Have you ever been on the side roads over there? Every little village has a little chapel.
Oh yeah.
And a little chapel, and we both made friends. The field commander of that outfit was a major, and he knew that I was from Louisville because of my jacket and everything. And he had been to the 1937 Kentucky Derby. And so we got to be kind of talking. We were friends anyway. And Father Kavanaugh got to be Easter Sunday. And he went to the commander and asked if he couldn't say Mass on Easter Sunday. And so the deal was good that he could say Mass on Easter Sunday if he would say a second Mass for the troops in the guard company. And so that first one, they had about 25 or 30 guys, or 20 guys anyway, that wanted to go. So they had to kind of do it outside. But after that, every morning, he said Mass in one of those chapels. You know, sometimes it only be like 2 pews in there. Yeah, but he said Mass every morning. After that, they'd get to another chapel, and I was his altar boy every morning. So we got to be pretty good buddies. And one time, it was near the end, and I'd gotten some. I found a whole batch of eggs, and I asked him if he had some eggs. Would he like to have some eggs? And he asked me where I got them, and I just took them. And no, he said he didn't think he wanted them. And I said, okay. So the next day, I asked him if he wanted these eggs. Again, he said, well, where'd you get them? And I said, well, a lady in that farmhouse up there, I said, I had some soap, and gave her some soap and some bread, and she gave me some eggs. I said, you want these eggs? He said, yeah. I know doggone well he knew I was lying. Oh, my. But the German people that we ran into down in there were, you know, really, really good people. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't, you know, you can't, you know, they did allow that so-and-so to get control and everything, but down in Bavaria down there, they just were very human. I mean, they weren't brutes, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
caught in it.
They shared what they had when, of course, you know, it was at the end of the war. I guess you could be cynical about the whole thing and say, well, you know, they knew it was all going to be over, and, you know, nobody being Nazi then and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's just, you know, you can tell when it's genuine, when it isn't.
Sure.
And I just felt like I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, you know, when because it was really last 2 or 3 days, almost everywhere we went, we were getting Red Cross food so much. We were getting so much food by then that we couldn't walk. I mean, we had to stop in a couple of days. See, what would happen when all these troops were walking around down there, there's thousands of them walking around. The Red Cross were coming out. They drove the old the 1940, 39, and 40 Chevrolet coupes. It was just, you know, one seat and a trunk across the back, painted solid white with a Red Cross on them. And they'd show up, and they'd go to the guard commander or what it is and said, when did you get your last food? And or have you had any food come to you? No, we don't. Well, or we do whatever. And the next thing you know, here come a truck, and they drop off Red Cross parcels. And by this time, there was Canadian parcels, and there was French parcels, and American parcels, and British parcels. And most of them liked the American parcels because of the cigarettes that were in there for the American cigarettes. And, but anyway, of course, I didn't smoke, and man,
pretty good bargain.
I'd lived, man. Yeah. Except for Smitty, he did, and I had to give him something. But anyway, they'd come over and drop off all this food, and we'd divvy it all up, and everybody had this food. And it got so that the next thing that came around, the commander says, there's a Red Cross truck in the vicinity, everybody, and he'd hide your food. Everybody had their food and everything, and he'd come in and he said, well, as far as I don't know when they got anything. The next thing, there comes some more food. And we got food for about 3 days in a row, and we've had so much food nobody could carry it, you know. And so then the parties were starting to start. And this is 4 or 5 days before the liberation thing. And some of those farms, some of those towns down there in Bavaria and those outlying places, they were not hurt at all, you know. And sometimes, and those people were really nice people. The the thing that struck me about the thing. Now, he told you in that book, he told you about that bridge being blown.
This did. Yeah.
And it must have been a pretty good fight going on up at our place. Our commander came back, and he was a rotten so-and-so. And he said he got across the bridge and that was the foothills of the Alps. Then we were talking about, and we got orders from our colonel that, and when we got down here at this particular place, he says we refused to move, and so everybody refused to move. And our wise guy, he jumps up and he says, if you're not ready to move when I come back here tomorrow, I'll call tanks in and we're going to machine gun a whole bunch of you. And so the word says when he comes back the next day, we don't move. But if he did bring in the tanks, that we would cross. And of course, the reason we didn't want to move is that he really felt like if they ever got us into the Alps, that we'd never get out. You know, that's what the general thought was. And so the next day, here he comes in, and we said to move. He says, okay, I got it. And he had tanks. And about the time was when that bridge went.
How about that?
And when the bridge went, there wasn't anything he could do, and he was disgusted. And he just threw up his hands like that and drove off. And that's the last I ever saw of him.
Oh, really?
And the guy the major that I told you about, that had come to Louisville, I struck up a pretty good conversation with him, and he was typical. I mean, the big tall cap and everything, and the red stripes, and down there, and his cape came all the way down, the riding boots and breeches, cape come all the way down to his heels in the back. And I told him, I said, we're a few days away from this war being over. And he can understand that. And I says, now when the war's over, I said, I want you to know that I'm going to have your boots, and I'm going to have that cape, and I said, they're going to be mine. And he'd laugh, and he said, yeah, okay, I can understand that. He said, I won't cause any trouble. And so it was kind of a big joke in between us. But we were hit pretty hard at Nuremberg by our own Air Force, and that was a 3 Hail Mary act of contrition day. That one was. The guard company lost about 30 men. We had some wounded, and I hear that somebody on the line had one killed. We had lost somebody somewhere, and that I was laying at the base of the tree, and a stick comes right through there, and something hit me on the back. Troy, it was a stone about the size of a concrete block. It just blew up a house right across the street, and a stone hit me right on the back, and I was saying, I don't think I can move, and the guy said, okay, don't move, just stay here, it's fine, but we're moving. And so I decided that I was going to have to move, and it probably saved my back, Yeah. I went ahead and walked it out. But in that raid, boy, he got it. It just is, ugly. He was impaled on a wagon tongue. It went all the way through him, and that cape went right through with him. Oh, what a mess he was. And he was a good guy. He was there doing what he had to do, but he wasn't snotty about it or anything. He just, and I was really sorry that he got killed. He was, and some of them I wouldn't even wouldn't even,
Yeah.
you know, but he was one of the good ones. Right after that, we didn't get anybody killed after that on strafing and everything, but we were getting guys hurt. But they were like hurting themselves, you know, like when we get caught and here comes the Air Force and they start strafing. You know, you run into ditches and guys were running into trees and breaking their arms and, you know, and stuff like that. And it's one day, it was right after Nuremberg, and everybody was really edgy. And as long as we were in some kind of mountains or hills or wooded areas, it wasn't too bad because, you know, you wouldn't be visible. But we looked out across an Autobahn, right out of Nuremberg, and I mean, it was just as far as you could see was flat as a pool table. And one little rise like this, little town out there, and we said we really didn't want to go, but said we had to go, so we started out across there, and we got out maybe a mile, and we went through a little village that was kind of set up on a forward slope of a hill, right like this, and we got through that village and we're down the other side when I heard all of a sudden just heard this noise, and it turned around and there's two P-47s came up over that hill. They'd been right on the deck, hedge hopping on the deck, and you couldn't hear them. They were down behind that, you know, with the hill in front of it. The sound was just going right over top of it, and they came up over that hill and turned around and looked them right in the eye. And all they had to do was, there was no place to go, and all they had to do was just flick the switch, and that would have been curtains, you know. Yeah. And they go, zoom, over they go, and next thing here comes a bunch of leaflets floating down. And we opened up these leaflets, and they were only about this big when they fell down, but you started opening them up, and they got as big as a newspaper. And the first thing you saw was a big American flag across the top, like bunting, you know, across the top, and then a big picture of Dwight Eisenhower. And the whole thing said that they, you know, we know you're there now. You know, the Air Force knows who you are and that you're there, and you don't have to worry about the Air Force anymore. What? And by that time, boy, you know, and from that time on, it was clear sailing because
sure.
You'd go on and do your march and everything, not worrying about it anymore.
Sure.
But see, because the Air Force at that time, the Air Corps, they didn't have anything to shoot at. I mean, they were shooting at bicycles and every other kind of thing because the Germans didn't have any airplanes then. And if they did have an airplane, they didn't have any gas to go in it. And so they were kind of running, wrecking havoc down there. But once they set these boots out there, everybody knows where they're down there, who you are and what you're doing. And you couldn't blame them. They had a whole bunch, 400 people walking down the road like troops. And, you know, then they threw out that big leaflet, and I said, whoa, man.
Good news.
By that time, the parties really started to happen.
Well, this is great. This is great. And
I feel like I've been wandering off here.
No.
Great.
Oh, no.